Hey guys, tonight we travel back to what many historians now call the single worst year to be alive, the year 536. You're not born into it, you wake up in it. And right away, something feels wrong. The light is all wrong. You shuffle out of your hut, your home, your monastery, or wherever you live, and stare up at a sky that hasn't looked normal for weeks, maybe months. It's not night, but it's not quite day either. The sun is there, somewhere, faint, pale, as if someone smeared soot over the sky and forgot to clean it off. The light is dim, thin, almost metallic. Crops refuse to grow under this half-light. Shadows don't fall properly, and everything smells faintly of something burnt. You think maybe it's just your village. But then a passing traveller tells you he's seen the same grey sky across 3 kingdoms. And when the monk in your town scribbles his records, he says the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon during the whole year. It's not just local, it's everywhere. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You try to convince yourself this is just a weird weather year. Maybe next season will be better. But it's not. Instead, the days grow even shorter, even dimmer. It's like someone turned down the brightness on the whole planet and forgot the password to turn it back up. You feel it in your bones first. That never warm chill that won't leave. The mornings never properly break. The birds don't sing as often. The insects seem confused. And the color green? It's becoming rare, like a fading memory. Historians today think something cataclysmic happened. Possibly a volcanic eruption so massive it shot ash high into the stratosphere, blanketing the earth in a sunlight-blocking veil. But back then, you don't know that. All you know is, you're cold, your crops are dying, and the sky looks sick. There's this haunting quiet everywhere, like the world is holding its breath. In Northern Europe, people begin referring to this time in whispers. In Ireland, annals will later mention a failure of bread in 536. In China, snow will fall in summer. In the Byzantine Empire, the emperor's courtiers start lighting lamps at noon. It's not just weird, it's unsettling. And then the dreams begin. You dream of fire and choking ash, of seas boiling and trees turning to glass. A child in your village says she saw the sun cough blood. Another refuses to go outside at all, he's convinced the light is cursed. No one corrects him. You try to remember the last time the air felt normal. You can't. It's like your body has adapted to living in an echo, lightless, lifeless, flavorless. Everything tastes like smoke. Even your water smells faintly of char. Still, life stumbles on. You try to till your land. You trade what little you can. But something in you knows. This is not just a bad year. This is something worse. The land feels different. The animals act different. Time feels like it's dragging its feet, unsure if it even wants to keep going. Some whisper it's the end times. Others say the gods are angry. A few wanderers claim they saw fire fall from the heavens, far in the north, maybe in the land of ice and volcanoes, but no one's sure. Historians still argue whether the culprit was a volcano in Iceland, or maybe one in Central America. Maybe it was both. Or maybe something stranger happened, like a cosmic collision. No one agrees, not even now. But you don't need a theory. You just need food, and warmth, and light, none of which are coming. So you wrap yourself tighter in old wool. You ration your last bag of grain. You ignore the way the trees creak like they're mourning something. And you pretend that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow the sun will rise properly. Spoiler, it won't. Not for a long time. You trudge out the next morning, hoping, pleading for even a glimpse of sunlight. But no luck. The sky hangs low like dirty wool, muffling sound and time itself. You blink, trying to guess whether it's morning or noon. It's just grey. Again. And colder. Much colder. What you don't know but will become painfully clear is that this isn't just a dark year. This is the year without a summer. A year where winter seems to stretch its fingers deep into the heart of what should be the sunniest months. August feels like late October. The snow that falls doesn't melt. the soil never softens, and the seeds you planted out of habit never break the surface. Everywhere you go, people are panicking. But it's a slow panic, the kind that spreads like frostbite, first numbness, then pain, then nothing. Your neighbors trade rumors the way they used to trade barley and salt. Did you hear that in Gaul, sheep are freezing in the fields? That in China, it snowed in summer? That birds fell from the sky, frozen mid-flight? Some of that is probably exaggerated, but not all of it. You gather with others around a weak fire, telling yourselves it'll pass. It has to. But secretly, you start counting the days since you've seen a full sun, and you can't. You simply can't. Historians today believe the global temperatures in 536 dropped by as much as 5 degrees Celsius, which doesn't sound like much, until you realize how fragile agriculture really is. Your ancestors knew this by instinct. No sun, no crops, no people. It's that simple. You start noticing things. Not just the frost that clings to your fingers when you wake up. Not just the way your toes feel like stone even indoors. You notice how your stored grain seems to go stale faster. How bread molds even in the cold. How your animals, what's left of them, refuse to breed. Even the bees are sluggish. Bees! What do they know that you don't? The famine creeps in silently. First it's just thinner soup, then fewer loaves, then entire days where your belly makes more noise than the marketplace. You chew bark, boil roots, nibble on leather like it's jerky, and still there's never enough. In villages across Europe and Asia, food riots begin. But it's hard to riot when you're too weak to shout. In Constantinople, the emperor's palace still glows with torchlight and silk, but even there, people whisper about the cold, about the sun that doesn't rise, about signs in the stars. And in the fields outside the walls, farmers abandon their crops and walk away, their faces blank with hunger. In China, imperial scribes record that yellow dust rained down like ash, and that crops failed in every direction. The emperor consults his astrologers. They look to the skies, searching for patterns, comets, omens, anything to explain what they can't control. Back in your world, your friend's daughter has stopped speaking. She just stares at the fire and hugs a rag doll she hasn't named. Her mother says she's fasting for the gods. But you know that look, that hollow, distant stare. It's not devotion, it's starvation. There's a grim practicality settling in now. You watch people barter family heirlooms for soup bones. You see children trade firewood for rotten turnips, and you don't judge them because you're doing the same. A fringe theory, whispered even in modern times, claims that people in certain areas may have tried to eat clay mixed with grass to feel full. Historians still argue whether that was real survival or desperation gone mad. But when your stomach feels like it's trying to devour itself, you'd try just about anything. One night, while lying on a mat of straw too thin for comfort, you try to remember what warm felt like. Not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of warmth that came from sun on your skin or laughter at a harvest feast. That feeling of safety, of enough. You can't find it anymore. All your memories feel frostbitten. Still, you rise again. Because that's what people do. You get up, you dig into frozen earth, and you hope the next day is better. Spoiler, it's not. But hey, maybe someone will show up with news. Maybe the merchants will return. Oh wait, they've stopped coming. You're used to the clatter of hooves and wheels on the road by now. Used to the jingling of trade caravans arriving with bolts of silk, sacks of spice, jars of honey, and always news from far away. That road used to be a lifeline. Now, it's just empty. The trade routes have gone silent. It's not just your village. Whole cities begin to feel like islands cut off, isolated, slowly drying out like riverbeds in a drought. The once reliable flow of goods and gossip has collapsed. What's the point of trading if no one has anything left to give? You hear that the Silk Road, yes, the Silk Road, that mighty artery of the ancient world, is now more of a frayed thread. Merchants who once braved deserts and bandits now refuse to travel at all. It's not just bandits now. It's desperation. It's starvation. It's a sky that never quite becomes day, and roads too dangerous to trust. Even the Byzantines, masters of trade and diplomacy, are struggling to keep routes open. Ships hug the coastlines like scared cats, avoiding open sea, their sails sagging in the cold wind. And when they do arrive, they carry less silk and more bad news. You remember an old peddler who used to come every season with strings of dyed beads and funny jokes about Persian kings. You haven't seen him in over a year. One night, someone says they saw his cart abandoned near the river, half burnt. You wonder what he traded for food that finally got him killed. Historians still argue whether it was the famine that killed trade or the collapse of trade that deepened the famine. Classic chicken or egg situation. But you're not debating. You're just trying to find salt. And salt's a problem now. Once it came from the coast or far-off quarries. But with trade gone, you either dig for it yourself if you know where or hope someone left a few crystals behind in the bottom of a cracked jar. Without trade, even communication begins to decay. Letters stop arriving. Messengers disappear. No more foreign news, no more foreign spices. Everything becomes painfully local and terribly repetitive. Every village you pass tells the same story. Dark skies, frozen fields, empty bellies. In some places, old roads are swallowed by the land itself, washed out by floods, buried under landslides, or simply forgotten. A few brave souls try to restart the networks, but the dangers are too great. Raiders lurk in the fog. Wolves howl closer to human homes now. And bandits? Oh, they've learned that desperation makes people easier to rob. And then there's the weird stuff. A traveller swears he saw a town where the wells turned red as if the earth itself was bleeding. Another claims a forest has started growing black moss overnight, covering trees like a disease. You laugh at first, but then you see the black moss too. No one talks about wealth anymore. Gold means nothing if it can't buy you bread. Your neighbours used to boast about dowries. Now they argue over dry firewood. You pass by abandoned carts, overturned wagons, rusted cooking pots left behind like tombstones. The world is shrinking. Once, you stumble upon a small group of travellers huddled around a dead horse. They're boiling its hooves. When you approach, they eye you like you're the next meal. You back away slowly and don't sleep well that night. Historians now know that the volcanic veil in the sky likely triggered years of failed harvests and social collapse. But back in 536, nobody's talking about atmospheric sulfate levels. They're just trying to survive. And without trade, without movement, without stories from afar, you start to forget there even is a world beyond your horizon. Your world is now a loop of repetition. Wake, search, eat if you can, shiver, sleep, repeat. Conversations dry up, laughter dies out, and markets become ghost towns. No more saffron, no more cinnamon, no more news, just ash and silence. You're used to hunger by now, but today it feels sharper. You suck on a twig, hoping it'll trick your mouth into forgetting. It doesn't. There's no ignoring it anymore. Famine is not a storm that passes. It settles. It stays. You watch your neighbour try to boil grass. You catch the scent, wet earth and desperation. You pretend you're not doing the same thing that night. People in your village used to save food for winter. Now, you're saving pebbles to weigh down your belly so it'll stop growling. Your family used to joke about who could eat the most at feasts. Now, you joke about whose turn it is to go ask the old widow if she has anything left. She doesn't. In places far from you, archaeologists will one day find mass graves from this era, hundreds of people buried quickly, anonymously. No tombstones, no prayers, just silence. Even in mighty Egypt, famine walks hand in hand with despair. The Nile fails to flood. That's not just bad luck, that's a spiritual crisis. The Nile must flood. It's how things are supposed to work. When it doesn't, it's like the gods themselves have stopped showing up to work. Cairo doesn't exist yet. But the cities that do, like Alexandria, begin to starve. The grain supply meant for Rome, Constantinople, and beyond disappears into a haze of dry fields and empty silos. Papyrus prices soar. Fish rot on docks. The scent of bread vanishes. In your own world, a man trades a small wooden idol hand-carved, passed down for 3 generations for a crust of bread. You watch him eat it too fast and throw up. He weeps after. Not because he's still hungry, but because the idol's gone, and he still feels hollow. Fringe tales start bubbling up. Rumors that some noble families have built underground stores. Hidden vaults filled with barley and salt. You wonder if it's true. Historians still argue whether these famine hordes existed, or were fantasy a hunger-born mythology. But even fantasy is something to chew on when your mouth is empty. The priests start to panic now. They light extra incense. They preach louder, wave their arms more. The offerings increase not out of faith, but fear. You hear someone sacrificed a goat in broad daylight on a stone by the old forest, something no one's done in 100 years. The village elder looked the other way. One day, you meet a traveller with scabbed hands and cracked lips. He says he came from the sea, that on the docks in a once rich port city, the ships have stopped arriving. That on the third night of his journey, he saw a boy roasting a boot over an open flame. You nod like that makes sense. It kind of does. Food becomes sacred. Not in a ceremonial way, but in the way it changes how people see each other. You watch families sit in silence as they divide a single dried carrot like it's gold. You feel guilt for chewing too loudly. You hide food like you used to hide coins. The old merchants used to carry perfumes from Arabia and spices from India. Now they carry fungus, dried and packed tightly. Some of it's edible, some of it's not. You take your chances. Children start looking thinner. Their voices get softer. A little boy named Fen trips while chasing a chicken and doesn't get up. He's not dead, just too tired. The adults look away. In the chaos, new rituals are born. Someone starts tying red thread around food jars to bless them. Another swears that drawing an X in ash across the doorway keeps hunger spirits away. You don't believe it, but you do it anyway. Desperate times call for, well, let's say creative coping mechanisms. You laugh once, a real laugh, when a friend tells you he tried to eat candle wax. Tasted like a promise someone forgot to keep, he says. It's the funniest thing you've heard in weeks. There's no real time anymore, just cold days and colder nights. You used to mark time by harvest festivals, market fairs, the blooming of certain flowers. Now, time is just. Before it got this bad, and after. You dream of food. Your dreams are full of figs, roasted meat, warm milk. You wake up chewing on your blanket. The earth feels like it's refusing to feed you, like it's punishing you for something. But no one knows what. And that not knowing might be worse than the hunger. Because if there's no reason, there's no solution. You wake up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. The kind that settles in your ears like cotton and makes you wonder if the world has stopped breathing. There are no birds this morning. No bleats from the neighbours' goats. No clang of cooking pots. Just wind, dry and cold, whispering through brittle trees. You pull your thin shawl tighter and step outside. You see a figure bent over in the field. For a moment you think it's someone planting, but no, it's someone digging. Not for crops, for something to eat. They're peeling bark off a tree with a rock, stuffing it into a cloth like it's treasure. You nod. You've done it too. Every village now has stories of strange meals. One man claims he tried boiling rat bones in nettle water and got a vision of his dead grandmother. Another insists the best way to cook a boot is to soak it for 3 days. You believe them. Hunger rewrites the rules. You hear children playing market. But instead of pretending to buy apples and wool, they're trading rocks and shoes. You want to find it cute. But there's nothing cute about make-believe food. The famine deepens. You don't even call it famine anymore. It's just life now. In the lands once ruled by Rome, once blessed with warm wheat and sweet grapes, the fields lie bare. Farmers abandon their tools, not because they're lazy, but because they know nothing will grow. The sun is too weak, the cold too cruel. You plant seeds and get silence. The mighty granaries of Europe, those enormous warehouses built to outlast siege and season, are empty. Or worse, guarded. You hear stories of men shot with arrows for stealing mouldy flour. One man tried to swap his wedding ring for a sack of millet. He got a slap instead. Historians today know that multiple harvests failed in a row during this period, year after year. The human body can endure hunger, but not hopelessness, and you're starting to feel that now. Someone tells you about food lines in the city. You imagine some kind of orderly system. But no, it's a fight, a crush. a shouting match over half a loaf and a fistful of barley. One baker is rumoured to be putting clay in his bread to stretch it. No one cares. They just eat it. There's a woman you used to barter with Hudra, with the curly grey hair and the sharp laugh. You pass by her hut. The door is open. She's sitting by the fire, staring at nothing. There's an empty bowl in her lap. You nod. She doesn't nod back. And then there's the meat. Not the kind that walks on hooves. You hear whispers. People disappear in the night. A pile of bones found in the woods, stripped too clean. At first it's just travellers, strangers. Then, maybe, it's someone closer. Historians still debate whether cannibalism was widespread in this era, or if it was just a desperate rumour. But in your world, the fear of it is real enough. You sleep closer to the fire now, and you sleep with a knife. The animals that once filled your world are disappearing too. Chickens are gone, goats are rare. Even dogs have vanished, either eaten or run off. You used to hear dogs barking all night. Now you hear nothing. You dream of fruit sometimes. Not just apples and figs, exotic things. Things you've never eaten. Mangoes. Starfruit. You wake up with the taste in your mouth and nothing to bite. A travelling monk visits your village. He says it's like this everywhere. That he walked from Thrace to Ravenna and saw no green fields. That people in the east are boiling their clothes. That one city has turned its cemeteries into gardens, but the plants still won't grow. You ask him what he thinks is happening. He shrugs and says, maybe the world has been cursed. Then he asks for food. You give him half a crust. You used to plan for the future. Now, you plan for dinner. That's it. You're not even sure what year it is anymore. Just that it's still this year. This long, slow, sunless, merciless year. And you still haven't seen the worst of it. You hear someone shout near the edge of town. Not in joy, not these days. It's panic. You rush out and follow the sound to the river, where half the village is gathered, staring in disbelief. The river's gone dry. Not just low, dry. The kind of dry that cracks the earth and leaves fish flopping in mud like forgotten coins. The kind of dry where you can walk across the riverbed and not get your feet wet. You do, in fact. Just to prove to yourself that it's real. Someone mutters that this isn't supposed to happen. Rivers don't just stop. But this one has. And you know it's not just yours. The Nile, too. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, has failed to flood. That's not just a drought. That's divine betrayal. For thousands of years, Egypt's rhythms were built around the river. Flood, plant, harvest, repeat. A pattern older than pyramids. When the Nile floods too much, you get inconvenience. When it doesn't flood at all, you get collapse. Back in your dusty world, the farmers curse the river gods. The priests say nothing. They've run out of explanations and incense. You see someone crouched in the cracked mud, digging with bare hands for a frog. They don't find one. Elsewhere, granaries once considered too full to fail now echo like tombs. Rome used to get grain shipments from Egypt like clockwork. Now, even the empire's breadbasket has turned to dust. A trader, probably the last one you'll see this year, arrives from the south. He's got nothing to trade. Just stories. He says Alexandria is a ghost, that in the temple of Serapis, pigeons have taken over, that starving men lit sacred scrolls for firewood, that the markets now sell sand cakes, made of flour and dirt and desperation. Historians still argue whether these events were truly simultaneous, or just linked by unlucky timing. But in your world, it feels like the whole planet is cracking at once. You used to measure prosperity by how many sheep you had. Now, it's how much clean water you can hoard without getting caught. When the river dies, your routines die with it. No fishing, no irrigation, no clay for bricks, no baths, not that you've had one lately. Water becomes a currency more sacred than gold. You begin boiling and reboiling the same water to cook bark twice. Someone in town starts charging people to drink from their well. At first, you scoff. Then you pay. Later that week, you hear the well's gone dry too. Your cousin, who's always been the quiet type, suddenly bursts into laughter at dinner. Except, there's no dinner. He's laughing at a wooden spoon. You realize he hasn't eaten in 2 days. You realize this might be his new normal. And it's not just the famine, or the cold, or the strange light. It's the way the earth itself seems to be withholding. Trees don't bloom, birds migrate and don't come back. Even the weeds look confused. Some old-timers start whispering about the gods leaving the land, that maybe the sun isn't hiding, it's gone. You try to laugh it off, but it stays with you that night. You have a dream that the stars are holes in a black cloth, and behind them, the gods are watching, deciding who to take next. In Egypt, across oceans of desert and fading empire, a scribe writes by candlelight that all was confusion, and none could explain it. You haven't met that scribe, but you know exactly how he feels. Someone in your village tries to sail downriver, hoping to find food. You never see him again. Maybe he found it. Maybe he became someone else's food. The earth creaks now, literally. You wake up to a small quake one morning, just enough to knock a bowl off the shelf. Everyone looks around nervously, as if the ground has joined the sun in turning against you. And yet, you survive. Somehow, you scoop water from the last puddle behind the blacksmith's house. You chew on boiled roots that taste like rope. You tell yourself that the sun will come back, that this is temporary, that the world has to reset. But a voice deep inside you wonders, what if this is just the new way of things? The cold sharpens, not in that cozy, winter evening by the fire kind of way. No, this is a wrong cold, like nature's gone off script. A kind of chill that clings under your fingernails, slides into your bones, and refuses to leave no matter how many layers you wear. You try to convince yourself it's just a bad year, maybe even a bad couple of years. But then you meet a man who says he's travelled from Italy. He's got frostbite on 2 fingers from spring. He swears he saw snow in the hills in June. And here's the thing, he's not lying. Across Europe, the air feels thinner, harsher. Summer becomes a rumour. In what was once the heart of Rome's old domain, the days remain dim, and the nights stretch on like wet rope. Wheat refuses to sprout. Olives turn bitter. Grapevines die young. You walk past once lush vineyards now choked with frost. Remember when Romans bathed in warm marble halls and wrote poetry about the sun? Now their descendants shiver under threadbare cloaks and pray not to lose another toe. Even the ruins of Rome, the old, proud bones of empire, seem colder. Wind whistles through broken arches. Moss grows on marble faces. And in empty forums, the only debates are between crows. In Ireland, monks begin scribbling that a failure of bread has struck the land. That's polite, monk. Speak for everyone starving. In Britain, whole settlements vanish. Were they abandoned? Wiped out? Historians still argue. But either way, no one's left to answer. Meanwhile, in Gaul, modern-day France, you pass a village where the fountains have frozen solid. Not in January, in April. A shepherd points to a dead lamb and says, "It was born into winter." He says it with the kind of calm that comes from giving up. Even the dogs look colder. You come across a church with stained glass windows so fogged over, it's like even God has frostbite. The priest inside is burning furniture. He says it's for warmth. You notice the altar's missing. There's a quiet horror settling in. Not dramatic, not fire and brimstone, just this slow, creeping realization that the seasons have broken. One woman in your village claims, this is all punishment from the heavens, that someone somewhere angered the divine. Another insists it's demons in the mountains, blocking out the sun with their smoke. You don't correct either of them. You used to laugh at those stories. But now, you watch the shadows. You listen to the wind. And part of you wonders, what if they're right? Your grandmother used to talk about winters in her childhood, how they'd pile blankets, roast chestnuts, and dance to stay warm. This isn't that. This is survival. There's no dancing anymore, just people pretending to sleep so they don't have to feel how cold they are. At night, the frost creeps inside. You wake to find your water jug frozen. Your breath fogs up like you're sleeping in a cave. You think about fire constantly. Not warmth. Fire. There's a difference now. You see a child with frostbitten ears. Her father's trying to rub warmth into them, but he knows it's too late. She's still smiling. That's the worst part. In Constantinople, the emperor's court lights lamps all day. The city of golden domes now glows dimly through fog. And yet, even there, The cold claws in. You hear stories of ice forming on marble floors, of fires that refuse to stay lit. In China, official records mention strange yellow clouds, snow in summer, and frost in harvest months. You don't live in China, but somehow you know their winter feels just like yours. Historians believe now that a volcanic veil had enveloped the entire planet, a high-altitude haze, blocking sunlight, lowering temperatures, and wrecking entire ecosystems. But you don't know that. You just know you can see your breath in May. And the sun? When it does appear, it looks tired, pale, like a dying candle flickering behind gauze. A travelling monk passes through with pages of Latin poetry. He's wrapped in 3 cloaks and still shivering. You ask him where he's headed. He says, "South, until the flowers return." You want to follow him, but you're not sure flowers exist anymore. The frost has reached Rome, and if it can reach Rome, it can reach anywhere. You sit near a dwindling fire, chewing a crust that tastes more like stone than bread when someone mutters it again. The end is near. You've heard it so many times now that it no longer startles you. It just sits in the air like smoke. But still, part of you wonders, is it true? In a world where the sky refuses to brighten and rivers dry up while frost creeps across the land, explanations are hard to come by. And humans? You're built to explain things even when the facts are thin and the gods are silent. So, you try. Some say it's a curse, that someone angered the old spirits. Maybe a king, maybe a merchant, maybe you. Others believe this is a punishment sent from above, a divine timeout for the sins of mankind. It must be. After all, what else could cause the sun itself to disappear? You hear of churches in Gaul where priests have started performing exorcisms on entire towns. Not for demons, for the weather. A desperate logic. You'd laugh if you weren't considering it yourself. In a monastery tucked somewhere in the highlands, a quiet man, thin, half-blind, and hunched over a wooden desk, begins writing. He scratches words into parchment with shaking hands, documenting each strange moment. In this year, he writes, a thick fog covered the heavens. That monk doesn't know it, but he's one of many. Scattered across the world, chroniclers begin recording the strange happenings. Some write with fear, others with awe, a few with the kind of grim detachment usually reserved for tax records. Future historians will depend on these writings. But for now, they're just a scattered chorus of frightened scribes trying to name the unnameable. You pass a town where no one uses the word sun anymore. They call it the ghost in the sky. You can't remember the last time you saw it clearly. You squint upward most days, trying to decide whether that pale smear is a cloud or something else. In the east, astrologers are working overtime. Emperors summon them for answers. They chart the stars, examine lunar eclipses, whisper to jade statues. One claims a serpent has swallowed the light. Another insists a celestial gate has closed. The emperor nods. He's not sure either. Meanwhile, a cult forms near the coast. A wild-eyed woman with cracked feet and tangled hair declares herself a messenger of the sun. She says the darkness is a test, and only those who follow her to the land of eternal flame will be spared. You laugh. Until 3 families leave with her. Historians still argue whether this period saw a spike in millenarian cults, or if it just felt that way, because fear travelled faster than truth. But you remember the feeling, a hunger for answers, even bad ones. You once believed in reason, in seasons, in the way the world used to tick along like a wheel. Now you half believe that maybe time itself has gotten stuck. A travelling healer shows up with black stones he claims fell from the sky. Sunday stones, he says. Swallow one, and you'll dream of spring. He sells out by nightfall. You meet a scholar who insists this is all foretold in the Book of Enoch. He quotes verses you don't understand. You nod anyway. At this point, anything sounds reasonable if it comes with conviction. You pass a woman writing symbols in ash on her doorstep. She doesn't speak to anyone, just draws the same mark each morning, 3 circles and a line. No one asks why. We all need our rituals now. The priests? They've doubled their sermons, but their voices shake more than they used to. You see one crying quietly after Mass. You don't interrupt. A new chant starts to spread among children. When the sky goes grey, don't look away. The light is sick, don't make it quick. You ask where they heard it. They say, it came in a dream. You've stopped trying to explain things. Now, you just observe and survive. Still, every once in a while, you find someone trying to understand, really understand. A boy collecting soot in jars, a girl mapping when the mist clears for a few moments, a monk sketching the shape of the dim sun at midday. You wonder if they'll ever find the answer, if the sun will ever explain itself, or if this is all just a story you're meant to pass on. You wake to news, actual news, not rumour or prayer. A traveller has arrived from the far north, and he's speaking of fire. Not the comforting kind, but eruptions, mountains spitting ash, lands shaking underfoot. He says he saw the sky go black in a single afternoon, even before the sun began to dim. You gather with others to hear his story. He talks of a distant island, green, cold, and volcanic, where the earth split open and poured smoke into the sky for days. He describes lightning dancing through ash clouds, animals running wild, and people vomiting from the stench. Iceland, they think. Or maybe it wasn't Iceland. Some now whisper it might have been El Salvador or both, maybe even more. Historians today still argue where the eruption that started all this really happened. Was it Iceland's volcanoes, blasting ash into the stratosphere? Or the Ilopango supervolcano in Central America, hiding under a quiet lake? The science points both ways, but you don't know that. You just know what the traveller says. The sky caught fire, and then the world went grey. It fits. Back then, people didn't know what volcanoes were, not really. A smoking mountain might be sacred or cursed. Some call them the breath of giants. Others believe they're the mouths of the underworld. Either way, when they roar, the sky listens. The idea that something you'll never see could reach out and change your life? It's terrifying, but it starts to explain things. You remember the fog that tasted like stone, the soot on your windowsill, the strange burn in your throat some mornings. You thought it was a bad fire nearby. Now you wonder, was that mountain ash? A monk in your village claims he had a vision of a ring of fire that surrounds the earth. He draws a map, crude, shaky lines, dots for mountains. You look at it sideways and think, maybe it's not so crazy. You pass a group of people standing in a field, staring at the sky like it's about to apologize. It came from the north, one says. Another insists, no, it was the west. A third mutters, the gods don't care about directions. Someone tries to collect ash in buckets, thinking maybe, just maybe, they can trade it. One woman rubs it on her skin and claims it keeps her warm. You try it. It doesn't. A few desperate souls say the ash is holy, that it's what's left of heaven burning. You don't believe them, but you don't stop them either. The traveller leaves after 3 days, taking his stories with him. He doesn't ask for food, he knows you don't have any. Still, the idea lingers. Maybe this started somewhere. Maybe it's not the end of the world, just fallout from something bigger. But then you wonder, if it was just one volcano, why hasn't it stopped yet? And this is where things get stranger. Some say there wasn't just one eruption, but 2, or 3. Maybe a whole chain of mountains exploded, one after another, like the world sneezing smoke into the sky for months on end. A few claim the sun has died, and what we're seeing is just its ghost. A man builds a strange device with wheels and copper mirrors, says he's going to trap sunlight. You never see him again. You keep waiting for the ash to settle, but it doesn't. It just hangs in the air like a mood. Some days it's barely there. Others, it's thick enough to taste. You learn to live with it, this veil that's draped over the world. You squint more. You squint all the time. And then there's the smell sulfur. Faint, but ever present. Like someone's cooking rotten eggs in the clouds. Later, modern scientists will find evidence of multiple eruptions around this time, giant ones. Core samples from glaciers will show layers of ash, chemicals, and volcanic glass. The earth remembers what the people forgot. But you don't have science. You just have soot on your fingers, snow in the summer, and stories about a mountain that screamed loud enough to change the sky. You hear the old monk again. He's muttering about the ice. Not just the frost on your windowsill or the crust of cold that never quite melts in the fields, but real ice. Deep, ancient ice. Of course you don't know what a glacier is. Not in the year 536. But centuries later, far in your future, scientists will plunge drills into Arctic ice cores, pulling out long, frozen cylinders of history. And inside those frozen scrolls, the answer to your grey sky. Acid, not the kind you pour from a bottle, but sulfuric acid particles, suspended in time, layer upon layer. These particles were spewed into the atmosphere by volcanoes, massive ones, casting a chemical veil across the earth and dimming sunlight like someone pulled a curtain over the stars. Modern historians and climatologists will stare at those layers and see the scars of 536. Two thick bands, dark, dirty, and rich with sulfur. One in 536, another in 540, double impact. You don't have ice cores in your world. You don't even have accurate calendars. But you do have the evidence all around you. Ash that won't wash off, snow that falls when it shouldn't, and a sun that still feels like a ghost. Someone in your town points out that trees are dying oddly, not from fire, not from bugs, just refusing to live. They bloom a little, then stop, as if they've forgotten how. Turns out those ice cores also show carbon changes, reflections of dying forests, crop failure, and atmospheric shifts. The Earth keeps receipts. You just don't know how to read them yet. A merchant from the east claims to have found a cave where the rocks weep black tears. He says the smell of sulfur was so strong it burned his nose. You believe him. Others bring tales of red snow, or rain that leaves stains on skin. Are these tales embellished? Probably, but even the embellished stories feel too close to home now. You meet a scholar with a pouch of odd crystals, tiny shards of volcanic glass. Sky glass, he calls it. He found it buried deep in sand near the coast. He says it fell with the ash. You turn a shard in your fingers and see the warped reflection of your own face. Hungry, tired, older than you should be. He says one day, people will find this glass all over the globe. He's not wrong. Historians still debate whether the volcano that caused the 536 event was in Iceland, El Salvador, or even Antarctica. Some even propose a comet impact stirred up the dust. But the truth may never be just one place. One eruption can change a sky. But 2, 3, 4? That rewrites history. And here you are, living in that rewrite. The monks continue to write. Some describe the fog that never lifts. Others mention birds migrating out of season. A few record dreams, visions of dragons choking the sky, of angels turning away, of the moon bleeding. You laugh when you hear that last one. But not too hard. Some folk begin burning sun candles, tall yellow tapers meant to honor the vanished light. Others bury silver coins, hoping to bribe the gods for one clear day. It doesn't work. You dig one up a week later and use it to scrape moss off a tree. You don't know anything about sulfur dioxide aerosols, or atmospheric scattering, or the Mauna Loa Observatory. But you do know this. The world is off, kilter. It's sick, and no one knows the cure. You meet a traveller who says he's going to climb the tallest hill and wait for the sun to return. He packs dried mushrooms, a blanket, and a bell to ring when he sees the light. You watch him go, weeks pass. You never see him again. In your quiet moments, you wonder if the light will ever truly return, or if this is how things stay, dim, grey, and laced with the taste of stone. You close your eyes and imagine warmth. It feels like memory. You've started to get used to the dark, to the cold, to chewing bark and calling it broth. But just when you think things can't get worse, they do. It begins with a cough. Not yours, someone else's, dry, ragged. It echoes through the market square or what's left of it. At first, you think it's just from breathing in ash or smoke, but then more people start coughing. Not just here, everywhere. Word spreads like wildfire, though nothing else can anymore. The plague has arrived. Not that anyone calls it that yet. They don't have names for diseases like you do now. No Latin classifications, no under the microscope animations. Just fear and smell. It creeps in slowly at first. A few sick here, a few dead there. Then it starts running like it knows the roads. 1 village, then 5. Then a whole city that goes eerily quiet overnight. You hear whispers of a merchant ship that docked and brought something terrible, that its crew bled from their gums and burned with fever. You hear of rats, so many rats, of strange swellings, black and hot to the touch, rising under the arms, around the groin, behind the ears. People call them God's blisters. A child in your village shows the first one. Her mother tries to hide her. By morning, both are gone. In Constantinople, the plague will later be known as the Justinianic plague, named after the emperor who ruled when it struck. Some scholars say it eventually killed up to 50 million people, nearly half the population of the empire. But here, in your corner of the world, there's no census. Just empty chairs. You walk past homes with red marks painted on the doors. You're told not to speak their names aloud anymore. Some people are buried before they're cold. The priests try. They chant longer, bless harder, burn herbs that smell like bitterness. But it doesn't stop the fever. The deaths outpace the prayers. A man on the road screams that the dead are rising. You don't believe him. Until you see a woman stumble out of a barn, eyes glassy, hands twitching before collapsing in the mud. Maybe she wasn't dead. Maybe she just looked that way. Either way, no one helps her. Historians still argue whether the plague hit exactly in 536, or if it came a few years later, around 541. But for you, the timeline doesn't matter. Hunger has no clock. Disease has no calendar. The streets empty again. Not from famine this time, but from fear. You begin recognizing it in others before they speak. The glassy eyes, the slurred speech, the way they move like the air weighs more. You learn to keep your distance. You learn to hold your breath when you pass a body. A woman offers you a pouch of salt in exchange for helping her bury her brother. You say yes, but you don't eat that night. Some say the disease came with rats. Others say with water. Some say it's punishment. Others say it's mercy or cleansing. You're too tired to choose sides. And then, the dreams start again. This time, they're hot, burning. You dream of red rivers, of voices calling from behind locked doors. You wake sweating even in this endless cold. You knew how to fight hunger. You could dig roots, chew leather, survive. But how do you fight a breath? You meet an old herbalist who says burning lavender keeps the sickness out. Another says it's mint. Someone starts selling death masks, cloths soaked in vinegar and stuffed with petals. They smell like hope and failure. You wear one anyway. A monk tells you he's seen cities where carts pass twice a day to collect the dead. You think he's exaggerating. Then it happens in your town too. People stop saying goodbye. They just nod. Or they don't. You find a note pinned to a door. Don't come in. We are with God. You don't. The hunger was cruel. But this? This is silent terror. It's knowing that the person you talk to today might be gone tomorrow. That you might be, too. There are no more chants in the square. No more bargaining. Just coughing, and footsteps, and graves. And you wonder again, how is anyone still alive? You wake to frost on your eyelashes and shouting outside your hut. You think it's more plague, but it's something different. This time, it's China. Well, not literally, but the travellers say it's happening all across the eastern lands. Word of frostbitten orchards and snowfall in August. Of fields of millet turned silver overnight. Of peasants fleeing their villages because the land refuses to grow anything. And worse, the emperor has noticed. In the imperial courts of the Northern Wei dynasty, ministers shuffle scrolls and astrologers draw frantic symbols. They claim the heavens are angry. That the unusual frost, the eclipse, the blighted rice fields, all of it is celestial warning, not climate. A young emperor calls for diviners, people who read the stars and crack the shells of turtles to search for blame. They say the ruler has failed in his virtue, and nature responds accordingly. Some even whisper he must abdicate to appease the skies. In your corner of the world, that might seem superstitious. But in China, this logic runs deep. The mandate of heaven is sacred. If crops fail, if floods destroy towns, or if unnatural weather strikes, it means the emperor has lost favor with the cosmos. You imagine trying to tell them it's volcanic ash. You chuckle. They'd probably exile you. But the symptoms? They're familiar. Snow in the summer, frost in the growing months, even the yellow river running oddly low. You don't need turtle shells to interpret this. You've lived it. In Chang'an and Luoyang, scholars write of the great dimming. The sun appears pale. You nod when you hear that. Yes, you think. It's the same ghost sun we see. Maybe this isn't just a European curse after all. In some villages, people turn to Buddhist monks for answers. The monks say the world is in a karmic cycle of decline, that this is the age of degeneration. Some believe them. Others riot. You meet a caravan driver from the Silk Road, one of the few who still moves between worlds. He's tired, grey-skinned, voice rough from the cold winds. He tells you the oases in the west are drying up, that a town near Dunhuang vanished after a sandstorm and left behind perfectly preserved bowls of uneaten food. He says he passed through cities where temples were ransacked, not by invaders, but by the faithful looking for answers in broken statues. You ask him what's the strangest thing he's seen. He says, a tree blooming in one village while the next two starve in snow. He doesn't smile. Historians today still puzzle over the Chinese records of this era. They mention bizarre astronomical events, extreme cold, and persistent famine. But some of the details blur into poetry. The sun seemed drunk, one poet wrote. You know exactly what that means. And in these distant cities, rebellions begin to bubble. Not big sweeping revolutions, but small, desperate uprisings. Local lords hoarding grain, villagers rising up. Armies stretched too thin to stop them. A famine doesn't just starve people, it weakens thrones. You hear that the emperor sent out relief grain convoys. Some made it, others vanished in the mountains. No one says if it was bandits or the cold that took them. Back in your world, people begin wondering if the East is worse off than you are. It's a strange comfort, this idea that the suffering is global, that you're not cursed alone. A monk shows you a scroll brought from the East. It's rough and faded, but the script is tight and deliberate. It talks of a dragon swallowing the sun, of temples that burned with blue flame, of monks meditating in caves where even the bats had fled. You don't know if it's prophecy or history. It all blurs now. But you do know one thing. Whatever this is, it's everywhere. The world itself seems to be holding its breath, and you're starting to wonder how much longer it can. You've grown used to bad news arriving on foot travelers with hunger in their eyes and stories hanging from their shoulders like wet cloaks. But today, it comes from farther away. Much farther. This time, the whispers speak of the great cities in the jungle. Mayan cities. Palaces of white stone and temples carved with stars. Places you've never seen. Across oceans and forests, but now, their silence is louder than any rumor. The stories say they're emptying. Abandoned plazas. Half-built pyramids left unfinished. Ceremonial fires gone cold. Cities that once hummed with trade and ritual are becoming quiet, overgrown by vines that move faster than memory. In your world, it's a strange kind of comfort to know even distant lands are struggling with the same dim light. Some say it's the gods abandoning their chosen. Others think the jungle is swallowing its own. Later, much later, historians and archaeologists will pore over these ruins and debate whether the 6th century Maya hiatus lines up with your year without a summer. The truth is murky. The reasons are tangled. But you feel it. This is no coincidence. Crops failed there too. Maize, their lifeblood, withered under skies that refused to shine. Droughts gripped the land. Rulers lost their aura of divine connection when their rain rituals fell flat. And the people? They did what you've seen others do. Some stayed. Others walked into the forest, not with shouts, but with quiet resignation. A few carved steely stone pillars with stories of war, hunger, and uneasy silence. And then, nothing. You don't know their names. They don't know yours. But you feel connected distant cousins in the dark. One traveller claims he crossed a sea to escape the sickness and cold, only to find cities vanishing into the jungle like ghosts. He says he saw an altar split in half by a tree that hadn't existed when it was built. He says he heard monkeys screaming in empty temples, as if they'd inherited the ruins. He doesn't stay long. Says the light here feels the same. Weak, wrong, familiar. You ask him if he believes it's the same sickness, the same sky. He nods, once, then moves on. Historians still argue whether the collapse of certain Mayan city-states in this era was due to global volcanic events, local droughts, or internal warfare. Some suggest it was all three, a perfect storm of ecological collapse and human fragility. In your world, it's hard to separate causes from consequences. All you see is the silence spreading. You imagine what it's like to live in a stone palace one year and forage in the trees the next. You think of all the scrolls, stories, and songs lost in the overgrowth. Then you look around and realize you don't need a jungle for that. Your own village has lost its storytellers, its laughter, its memory. Even your language feels thinner. One night, by firelight, someone hums an old melody. You recognize it but can't remember the words. No one can. You all just sit there, nodding to a song that no longer has a name. You wonder if that's what happened to them too. Not a dramatic end, just forgetting. You've long since stopped expecting good news. But now, even the familiar news, the bad kind, starts to take on new shapes. This time, it isn't weather or sickness. It's kings falling. You first hear of it from a passing soldier who no longer wears his regiment's colours. He says the warlord he served was washed away by the cold. Whatever that means, you don't ask questions. But later, by the fire, someone whispers that entire kingdoms are beginning to crack open like dried bread. It starts small. A tax collector doesn't return. A local baron flees in the night. Forts once brimming with banners are now empty, their gates swinging in the wind. One kingdom is said to have collapsed because its entire harvest froze in the field before anyone could pick it. You don't know much about court politics, but you do know this. Leaders can't lead on empty stomachs. No bread, no soldiers. No soldiers, no power. In the Byzantine Empire, Emperor Justinian is still trying to conquer the Western Roman territories. He sends generals across oceans, dispatches gold, decrees laws. But the timing? Awful. He's fighting not just rebellions, but a dying world. And here's the twist. Some of his conquests work. His armies take parts of Italy and North Africa. But then the plague hits, the cold deepens, and supply lines collapse. His victories begin to rot from the inside. Historians still argue whether Justinian's grand reconquests ultimately strengthened or weakened the empire. Some say he overreached. Others believe his timing was cursed. But you, watching from the fringes, don't need a historian to tell you that winning a battle during a famine isn't really winning. You hear of another king who declared war in the spring only to find his horses dropping from exhaustion before summer even started. The fields couldn't feed the army couldn't fight, and when the soldiers returned, they brought sickness with them. It wasn't a battle, it was an unraveling. In Gaul, rival lords begin splitting apart alliances like dried wood. You pass a village where 3 different banners fly, none of which match. When you ask who's in charge, a man with frostbitten ears just shrugs. Depends who wakes up first, he says. In the north, a chieftain tries to rally his tribe to war, but half his warriors are dead from frost, and the rest are trading swords for animal pelts. He ends up dying in his sleep. Some say it was poison, others say grief. Even the churches feel the strain. Bishops who once held the power of kings now struggle to keep their doors open. Tithes dry up. Faith is stretched thin. Priests begin skipping sermons not out of heresy, but out of hunger. The truth is, systems need predictability to function. Seasons, harvests, sunshine, calendars that work. But in your world, nothing is predictable anymore. Not the weather, not the health of your animals, not the mood of your neighbors. And so, the great systems, kingdoms, empires, cults, churches start to crack, some loudly, others silently. You watch it happen slowly, like a tall tower leaning just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to draw notice. Until one morning, it's just gone. One of your village elders says, "This is what happens when the heavens stop choosing favorites." You don't quite know what that means, but it feels right. In one village, you find a pile of old coins, buried hastily near a ruined manor. Someone thought wealth would still matter. They were wrong. No one takes them. They're just shiny memories now. A child nearby tells you she heard a story where kings once ruled the skies. Not anymore, she says, and skips off into the mist. And you think maybe she's right. Maybe the cold and the ash and the hunger aren't just attacking people. Maybe they're dismantling the idea of power itself. One forgotten king at a time. You're kneeling by a shallow stream, trying to scoop water with a cracked bowl, when someone mutters the phrase that's been spreading faster than the plague. It's the dust. You glance up. Dust? Really? After everything famine, cold, kingdoms collapsing now, we're blaming dirt? But it sticks in your mind. The traveller who said it is older, with the hunched look of someone who's walked a lot more than he's eaten. He says he saw the sun dim years ago, after what he describes as a red snow powdery flakes that hissed when they landed. He believes the dust is still up there, high in the sky, forming a veil between the earth and the sun. You want to scoff. But you remember those strange mornings when the light never broke through, when the sun looked more like a silver coin behind a fogged window. It always felt like something wasn't letting the light in. Later, centuries later, scientists will begin calling this the dust veil theory. A volcanic supereruption throws sulfur dioxide high into the atmosphere, where it reacts with water to form fine aerosol droplets. These droplets don't just block light, they reflect it, bouncing it away from the Earth and causing the temperatures to plummet worldwide. But right now, all you have is instinct. The crops failed because there was no warmth. The snow fell in summer. Even your shadow seems ashamed to appear. And now, people are starting to say what they've only whispered before. Something is covering the sky. You meet a tanner who says his goats have been giving birth too early. They think it's winter, he grumbles, spitting into the dirt. The skies confuse them. You want to argue, but you've noticed it too. Chickens not laying, bees vanishing. Nature seems uncoordinated. The dust, you think. The veil. It's not just metaphorical anymore. You remember the rain that stained your tunic with soot, the mist that left smudges on glass, the wind that sometimes smelled like old firewood. It wasn't just odd weather, it was particulate. The very air was different. One man claims he climbed a mountain during a clear spell and could see the sky was bruised. His words, not yours. Another swears he saw the stars flicker like candles behind gauze. Historians today still argue about which volcano or combination of volcanoes could have created such a global dust veil. Iceland? Central America? A mystery eruption in Antarctica? The evidence points in all directions, and none. But here's what matters. The world was wrapped in a shroud. And you? You were inside it. A scholar you meet near a monastery has begun writing what he calls a calendar of the dimming. He records days of grey, days of heavy fog, days when the sun looked white and false. He's convinced it's the dust veil's doing. You help him gather notes, mostly because he shares his boiled oats. One night, you and a few others watch the moon rise, except it doesn't. Not really. It glows faintly, like a dying ember. You remember the monk's words. It's like trying to see the candle through smoke. Someone near you whispers, maybe the world is asleep. You don't reply. Later, in a future full of microscopes and satellites, the dust veil will become a case study, a warning about how fragile Earth's climate truly is, how one eruption, or a series of them, can dim the sky for years, cool the oceans, kill the crops, and alter history. But you already know that. You're living inside the case study. You dream of wind sweeping the sky clean, of rain that smells like rain, of a sun that casts real shadows again. You try not to imagine that this veil might stay forever. But some nights, it feels like it already has. You're sitting under what should be the midday sun, watching your breath fog the air, when a boy passes by with a scroll clutched tight to his chest. It's from the monks, he says. New pages just copied. You follow him to the monastery not because you're a scholar, but because in a world where the sky won't speak and kings are toppling, sometimes words are the only thing that still work. Inside it smells of wax and ink and something you can't quite name, maybe hope. A dozen scribes are hunched over old tables, their hands cracked, eyes red from strain. One is copying slowly, carefully. The sun gave no light, like the moon, and the stars were not seen. You lean in closer. You've heard this before. That line's from Procopius, a historian in far-off Byzantium. The monks are preserving it, spreading it, copying it like gospel. You pick up another scroll. This one has notes from Gaul. A thick mist in the air, and all warmth withheld. Then another from an Irish annal. Failure of bread from the 12th month to the 15th. And then the strangest one. Men speak of a time when the sky forgot to open. No one knows who wrote that one, but you believe it. Back then, people didn't have science. They had observation. They watched the moon, the tides, the stars, and when all those things stopped behaving, they wrote it down. Some wrote out of fear, others out of faith. A few, maybe, just didn't want the world to forget. Historians today rely on these records to piece together the horror of 536. And make no mistake, it was horror, written in the margins of prayers, taxes, and market logs. But you? You're not writing history, you're living it. A local farmer brings a ragged page to the monks. It has only one sentence. The birds do not come back. They copy it down anyway. At night, you hear them reading aloud by candlelight, trying to name what's happening, as if naming it will somehow make it manageable. They debate the words. Was it darkness or mist? Ash or fog? You want to tell them, it doesn't matter. It all feels the same when your crops won't grow. One monk, young and skinny, insists on recording every oddity. Today, the sun looked greenish at noon. A tree grew flowers in frost. A traveller claims he saw 3 suns. You raise an eyebrow, but no one stops him, because everything feels possible now. Even the impossible. You help sort the records. One page smells like burnt parchment. Another's been reused, scraped, clean and written over. You squint and catch ghost words underneath. Probably a hymn, replaced now with famine counts. In the margins, someone's drawn a crooked star, and beneath it, we are under something. That's the whole note. You don't disagree. Historians still debate whether these medieval chronicles were exaggerated. Maybe they were trying to sound poetic. Maybe they misunderstood what they saw. But the pattern is consistent from Ireland to Syria to China. Dark skies, dying crops, cold summers, unending dread. A pattern of suffering recorded in ink. You ask a monk why they bother. Why write when most people can't read? When parchment is scarce and no one has answers? He looks at you, eyes sunken but calm, and says, because someone has to remember this, so they don't pretend it didn't happen. You nod. That makes sense. Because forgetting might be worse than suffering. Later, you sit by the fire and read one of the copied chronicles. It's shaky Latin, awkward in places, but the message is clear. We feared the sun had died, and with it, the joy of men. You fold the page and tuck it into your coat. Not because you need it to remember, but because someday, someone else might need to know you were here. You're sitting beneath a tree that forgot to bloom, picking at moss and trying not to think about food, when a traveller drops something into your hands. A piece of wood. Just a sliver. Barely thicker than your thumb. Look at the lines, he says. You raise an eyebrow, great. Tree trivia now? But then you do look, and you see it. The growth rings are strange. Thin. Barely there. Like the tree barely grew at all. He tells you he's been collecting wood, old wood from places no one wants anymore. From torn down barns, rotted fences, broken boats, and every time, the trees all say the same thing. Something was wrong in 536. You laugh, a little bitterly. Yeah, you mutter. We noticed. Much later, modern scientists will study trees just like this dendrochronology, they'll call it. The science of tree rings. And they'll find that in 536, trees around the globe stopped growing. In Ireland, in Scandinavia, in North America, even in the high Andes. Everywhere they look, the rings tell the same silent story. Light went missing. You press your thumb to the ring and feel a strange connection not just to the tree, but to the planet itself. The wood holds a memory that doesn't fade. The traveller leaves you with the sliver. Burn it if you want, he says. But maybe save it. Trees don't lie. You keep it. Elsewhere, someone brings back samples of bogwood trees long preserved in wet earth, now exposed by shrinking marshes. Same story. Same missing years. They call it a growth suppression event. You call it proof. Another village elder insists that during the year of darkness, the oak trees refuse to give acorns. His father told him, and his father's father. Now, it sounds less like folklore and more like observation. One night, a storm rolls in lightning, thunder, real weather again. And when it passes, you find a tree split by a strike. You check the rings, same thin lines, same lost time. Historians will later stack these wooden records side by side, across continents and centuries, and match them perfectly. The tree rings of 536, 550 form a kind of wooden barcode, a global pattern of stunted growth. Even the bristlecone pines, the oldest trees on Earth, some older than entire civilizations, show the scars. But you don't need a lab or microscope. You just know that the trees are growing wrong, or not growing. A woodcutter nearby says his axe doesn't sink as deep anymore. Like the wood's holding its breath, he mutters. You believe him. In another town, a monk is carving a walking staff from ash wood and stops suddenly, frowning. There's no weight in this, he says. No life. You're not a tree whisperer, but even you can tell. Nature is off. You hear from a passing herbalist that in the northern forests, some trees are blooming out of season, while others shed leaves before they grow. He calls it a calendar collapse. Another story says the sacred yew in a village grove hundreds of years old wept sap during the longest cold. People gathered it in jars, thinking it was divine tears. Now the tree stands bare. You ask yourself, what else keeps records in silence? What else has been watching all along? You stare up at the skeletons of trees around your village. They stand like witnesses, and you feel the weight of their memory pressing down on you. The sky may forget, people may forget, but the trees? They never do. You wake to singing, not the cheerful kind. Not songs of spring or harvest or even morning. These are voices raised in desperation, wild, unsteady, ragged with belief. You step outside and see them. A cluster of figures walking barefoot through the cold mist, chanting in a broken rhythm. They're led by a man with burning eyes and a splintered staff. He's wearing a crown made from wheat stalks, brittle and brown. You recognize the look. Not madness, exactly conviction stretched too thin. Someone mutters, "It's another prophet. This one's the fourth this month." They come out of the hunger now, like mushrooms after rain. People with fire in their hearts and apocalypse on their tongues. Some claim visions, others scream repentance. One woman stood on a rooftop last week, shouting that the sun had married the moon and forgotten the earth. That one fell. Or jumped. In normal times, you'd dismiss them. But these aren't normal times. When your sky's broken and your crops rot and kings vanish like smoke, a little prophecy feels almost reasonable. This new one, he calls himself the Mouth of Light, says the darkness is mankind's punishment, that it's not just the sun that's been hidden, but the truth. Says only the pure will survive what comes next. He gains followers fast. Not because he's wise, but because he's loud. Because people need a shape to put around their fear. Historians still argue whether apocalyptic cults spiked during the 532nd, or if the records just survived better. But oral tradition, art, and fragmented writings suggest a surge in millenarian movements, the belief that the end of the world was imminent, and perhaps deserved. You meet a former tax collector who's now living in a cave, wrapped in linen, waiting for the skies to open and angels to descend. He offers you dried roots and tells you, calmly, that time itself is unraveling. That soon, nothing will matter. You believe him. For about half a second, in Gaul, a self-declared prophet demands people burn their possessions and walk into the mountains to meet the brightening. None return. In Syria, entire villages fast for weeks at a time, hoping to break the curse with piety. They don't succeed. One monastery creates a massive tapestry, all black, meant to represent the sky. They carry it through the countryside, draped over poles like a funeral shroud. People kneel when it passes. You've stopped laughing at these things. They're sad. And sometimes they make a kind of sense. People crave answers. And when no one, not priests, not rulers, not monks can provide them, they turn to whoever speaks loudest, or strangest. One man climbs a pillar and refuses to come down until the sun returns. He dies up there, skin pale as ash. A woman walks backward through every town she enters, claiming time must reverse to fix the world. She wears a crown of frozen twigs. Children follow her, mimicking her steps, until a fever takes her. You hear stories from the north of sacrifices, some symbolic, others not. In your village, a boy draws eyes on every wall, every stone. He says the sky is watching, and we've disappointed it. You want to tell him to stop, but secretly, you're glad someone's paying attention. Even the priests are uneasy. Their sermons now include more fire, more threats, less mercy. You see them cross themselves with shaking hands. One weeps openly during a liturgy and says, "God no longer hears us." You begin to wonder if he's right. In a nearby town, someone paints a mural of the world upside-down oceans in the sky, stars buried in the soil. The artist disappears afterward. The mural fades in the rain. Still, people stare at it. A traveller passes through, wrapped in a cloak full of stitched-on charms. He carries a bell and rings it once every hour. When asked why, he says, "To remind the sun what it sounds like." He moves on. You remember the sound for days. Historians might call this mass delusion, or cultural trauma, or simply coping. You call it a scream in the dark, a scream wearing many masks. You light a candle that night, not because you believe it'll change anything, but because you don't want to forget what light looks like. And as it flickers, you whisper a prayer not to a god, not even to the sky, but to yourself. Please, remember this. Please, survive this. Please, don't lose your mind before the sun comes back. You sit on a log, slick with mist, rubbing your fingers together for warmth, listening to a tale you haven't heard since childhood, but now it sounds different, heavier. The old man beside you leans in and says, "This is how it begins. The Fimbulwinter, the great cold before the end of everything." You remember that word, Fimbulwinter, a Norse legend. A winter so long, so cruel, so endless, that it would precede the twilight of the gods' Ragnarok. Back then, it was just a fireside story, a fantasy. Now, it's starting to feel like a warning we ignored. He tells you that in the old sagas, there were supposed to be 3 winters without a summer. Sound familiar? You nod, staring at the trees that haven't budded in over a year. In the sagas, wolves devour the sun. The earth shudders. The sky splits. Brother turns on brother. Fire falls from above. He doesn't need to spell it out. You've seen half of that already. And suddenly, the line between myth and memory begins to blur. Historians now wonder if those Norse myths were echoes of real disaster, passed down through generations, embroidered with gods and beasts. Were the skalds singing of events they didn't fully understand but couldn't forget? You meet a wanderer from the northern coasts who says entire fishing villages are gone, not destroyed, just vanished. Boats tied to empty docks, fires long out, no footprints in the snow, just salt and silence. He swears he saw a ring of ice form in the sea, miles wide, says it looked like the world had frozen mid-breath. He also claims he saw the sun blink. Not set blink, you believe him. You remember the children's rhymes about wolves chasing the sun and moon across the sky. Now, you hear a new version. The sky forgot the morning, the moon forgot the night. The wolves ran faster and swallowed all the light. You hear this from a 5-year-old. That night, someone paints a wolf's mouth around the rising moon. It's a joke. Or maybe not. Elsewhere, someone builds a great bonfire, the largest you've seen in months, meant to tempt the sun home. You gather around it, not because you think it'll work, but because you miss warmth that isn't just metaphorical. Someone begins reciting Norse stanzas. Someone else adds lines from the Book of Revelation. Another sings an old Egyptian hymn to Ra, begging him to return. Different cultures, same fear. A monk at the edge of town copies a myth about a serpent that wraps the world, tightening as the end draws near. He adds a note. It may be now. You wonder if the people who wrote these myths ever imagined someone would one day live through them. Historians still argue about myths' connection to climate. Was Fimbulwinter inspired by a real volcanic event? Was the twilight of the gods actually just a long, deadly dimming? Some dismiss it. Others see too many coincidences. You see what's right in front of you. a sun that doesn't shine, a moon that barely glows, a world cracking like thin ice, and people telling stories not to escape but to explain. You walk through a forest where the snow shouldn't be. The trees whisper. Not literally, but with every creak and groan, it feels like they remember. The sagas said after the long winter, fire would come, the sky would burn, the seas would rise. You shiver and wonder if that part is next. Someone carves runes into a standing stone near your village. They say it's a protection spell. Others say it's a memorial for the world as it used to be. You believe both. You sit by the embers of a dying fire, close your eyes, and whisper the first few lines of a myth you barely remember. When the sun turns to smoke and the stars hide in fear, the wolf's breath chills the bones of the last of men. You don't know the ending. Maybe no one does. But you open your eyes to the same grey sky, and you realize you're living the myth now. You hear the name Justinian again. Not from a traveller this time, but from a bishop who's passing through your region on a pilgrimage. He carries scrolls, rumours, and a very tired horse. Over weak broth, he talks about the emperor in the east, the one who dreamed of restoring Rome's glory. He says Justinian's palaces still shine in Constantinople, that his mosaics glitter with gold leaf, even as the world around him seems to be unravelling. But beneath that gleaming surface, things aren't quite so imperial anymore. You learn that while you were chewing bark and watching the sun refuse to rise, Justinian was building a law code, a sweeping set of reforms meant to organise society, preserve Roman tradition, and lay down the rules of a just empire. He called it the Corpus Juris Civilis. You imagine a man writing laws while ash falls from the sky. It almost makes you laugh. Meanwhile, his generals were sent out to reclaim old Roman lands, Italy, North Africa, parts of Spain. Victories came, but at what cost? Armies died not just from battle, but from hunger and plague. Supply chains snapped. Villages vanished. Some cities were conquered twice, once by sword, once by sickness. Historians still debate whether Justinian was a visionary or just unlucky a ruler cursed to rebuild an empire during the worst climatic catastrophe in recorded history. Was he blind to the world collapsing around him? Or was he stubborn enough to try and hold it together anyway? From where you sit, it feels like a man trying to pour water into a pot with no bottom. You hear he ordered the construction of the Hagia Sophia during these years, a church so massive its dome is said to float like heaven's eye. You wonder if anyone could appreciate such beauty with so much darkness outside. Still, the bishop says, people clung to Justinian's vision, the dream of Roman order of structure, stability, eternity, even as the very air grew colder and thinner. You ask the bishop if Justinian ever saw the plague. He nods. Saw it? He caught it. Apparently, the emperor himself fell ill during the outbreak, burned with fever, raved for days. Somehow, he survived. But thousands, maybe tens of thousands, died every day in his capital. Bodies were stacked in old cisterns, buried in mass graves, shoved into the sea. You realize Justinian's legacy wasn't just scrolls and domes, it was trying to govern chaos, to build something timeless in a time when time itself seemed broken. You can relate, because in your little corner of the world, you've tried to hold things together too. Your family, your hope, your grip on normal. You've patched your home, you've mended tools. You've written dates in the dirt, just to feel like the calendar still matters. And now you see a mirror in this distant emperor, trying to pretend the world still works, even when the sky says otherwise. You ask the bishop if the emperor has given up. He smiles, sadly. No, he says. Justinian believes that law and order are eternal, that Rome never really ends. You wonder if that's true, or if Rome, like the sun, can be hidden behind ash long enough to fade from memory. In your dreams, you see a man in golden robes, standing in a grey courtyard, writing laws on blank parchment. Every time he finishes a sentence, wind blows the ink away. When you wake up, you remember only one phrase, "Let justice be done, though the world perish." And you're not sure if that's bravery or denial. You're crouched by a wall of stones, your hands deep in a patch of stubborn, half-frozen lichen when it hits you. You've survived. Not in any glorious, trumpet-blaring way. There's no parade, no applause. Just you, your fingers stained green, your breath misting in the still, untrustworthy air. But you're still here. The famine didn't take you. The plague missed. The cold gnawed, but didn't bite deep enough. You're thinner now, hungrier, maybe a little mad around the edges. But you're breathing, and that counts for something. You hear the word survival. More now. Not as a future hope, but a current fact. A hard-earned, mud-soaked, frostbitten badge of honor. People in your village have started using old words again. Words they stopped saying when things got bleak. Tomorrow. Next season. Spring. You don't know whether to laugh or cry when you hear them. You've learned things no one ever taught you. Like how to identify the least bitter types of moss. How to cook shoe leather with enough salt to make it chewable. How to make a lamp from animal fat and a bit of rag. You've learned the rhythm of hunger. How it comes and goes in waves. How your body tricks you by making you feel full after the third day, then drops you hard on the fourth. You've become good at pretending you're not cold. That's your best skill now. A friend shows you how to make soup from boiled reeds. You trade him a sharp stone you shaped into a knife. This is how life works now. Exchange, scrape, endure. You watch a girl skip stones across a frozen stream. It's the first time you've seen someone play in a long while. That night, you find yourself smiling at your own reflection in a dark puddle. You look like a ghost, sure, but a ghost that refuses to leave. A few families start returning to fields that haven't yielded in 2 years. They break the frozen crust with sticks and spades. No one expects a miracle. But the act of trying, that's the miracle. Someone paints a sun on a barn wall. Bright yellow, cartoonish, with rays like fingers. It's wildly optimistic, and everyone teases them for it. But they leave it there, just in case. You begin to sleep a little deeper, not soundly, but enough to dream. One night, you dream of a world with green in it. Not lush, not Eden, but possible. You wake with a tightness in your throat, not from hunger this time, but from the sudden shock of remembering what hope feels like. Historians today look at this period and marvel at how anyone made it through. How, in the middle of the 6th century, when the skies went dim, the crops failed, the rivers dried, and pestilence circled the globe, human beings endured. They see evidence of resettled towns, new trade routes, language shifts, art styles changing. They call it adaptive resilience. You just call it stubbornness. You've learned to survive without expecting anyone to rescue you. The sun didn't swoop back in. The gods didn't undo the damage. No angel shouted, "It's over," from the mountaintop. Number. You endured it. Quietly, reluctantly, fiercely. You learned that survival isn't noble. It's messy. It's undignified. It's chewing roots and wearing the same cloak for 3 winters and forgetting what honey tastes like. But you survived. That counts. In a way, it counts for everything. And now, the air doesn't feel quite as cold. Not warm, don't get greedy, but less hostile. The snow comes later, melts quicker. The clouds sometimes part. The sun is still pale, but it doesn't hide all day anymore. Maybe it's not a comeback, but it's not over, either. And neither are you. You wake up, and for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, something's different. You blink twice, just to be sure. The sky still pale, still shy as letting through a bit more light. Not much, but enough that shadows stretch a little longer. You stare at your hand in the sunbeam, like you've never seen it before. You breathe in air that doesn't taste like ash or cold metal. There's still chill in your bones, but it's different now. Less cruel, more like memory. A neighbor knocks on your door. Yes, knocks, like it's an actual morning, and says she saw buds on the plum tree near the old well. You follow her there, and she's right. Tiny green shoots, daring to poke through bark that's been still for years. You both just stand and stare. Neither of you speaks. You don't need to. Something is shifting. You walk through the village and feel it. There's more movement, more eyes lifted. A boy throws a stone into the stream and watches it ripple not out of boredom, but curiosity. A man you haven't heard laugh in 2 years makes a joke. It's not even funny. You laugh anyway. Even the animals act different. The birds that left never returned. But now you see new ones. Strange colors. Different songs. As if the sky sent you replacements. The fields? Still patchy, still bruised. But someone plants anyway. There's no ceremony, no grand return to agriculture, just two hands pushing seeds into dirt with more hope than reason. Historians will say that by 542 or so, the skies began to clear. Sunlight grew stronger. Crops began to recover. Trade routes reopened. People emerged from years of disaster, blinking into a world that looked familiar but wasn't. It never would be again. But they don't know what it felt like. You do. You remember how the days once dragged like chains, how you couldn't tell morning from afternoon, how you counted meals in half rations and warmth in the number of embers left at dawn. And now, you notice the skies bluer, still washed out, still thin but bluer. The clouds seem less burdened. The wind is still cold, but not angry. You hear travellers again. Actual traders. One offers salt for dried mushrooms. You trade. Not because you need salt, but because trading feels like a promise that the world is turning again. A nearby village hosts a feast, not a real one, just a shared pot of soup and a song no one remembers the words to. But everyone hums along. You sit beside a fire that doesn't feel like life support, just warmth. And it hits you. You made it through. The worst has passed. Not completely, not everywhere. There are still people coughing, still fields that won't bloom, still churches half empty and forests full of ghosts. But the heavy part, the part where everything stopped moving, is loosening its grip. You hear someone call it the climb. Not recovery, not rebuilding, just a slow, careful climb out of the darkness. You like that, because that's exactly what it feels like. No one's running, no one's leaping for joy. But the footpath is visible again. The slope is steep, but it's not vertical. And step by step, you take it. People start talking about the future again, carefully, like it's a new language they're trying to relearn. One man says he wants to replant his orchard. Another dreams of building a better road before the next snow. Someone else says they might start teaching their daughter to read. They all speak softly. Like if they raise their voices, the sky might take it all back. You understand. You feel it too. The fear that this light is temporary. That the warmth might vanish again. That the sun could forget you once more. But it hasn't. Not today. And maybe, just maybe, it won't tomorrow either. You're watching your neighbour clear rocks from a field that hasn't yielded anything in years when you feel it again, that uncomfortable itch just behind the ears. Why didn't we see it coming? The question has been following you around like a stray dog. You ignore it, try to feed it old excuses. But it won't leave. Back in the thick of it, no one had time to think about why it all happened. You were too busy trying not to starve or freeze or weep in public. But now, with the sun almost trustworthy again, with the frost receding and people planting onions like they actually believe in them, you finally start to wonder, were there signs? Could someone have prepared? A monk in your village thinks so. He's been collecting every old legend, every omen, every scrap of lore that might have hinted at this catastrophe. He reads them aloud, poems about the moon, losing its face, dreams of fire falling from mountains, stars disappearing for 3 nights. Warnings, he says. You're not so sure. But it haunts you anyway. Historians in the far future will ask the same question. They'll study layers of volcanic ash and tree rings and ice cores and wonder, was there anyone who could have known? Was there some wise elder who saw the mist and the cold and the sickness and said, we should store grain, build stronger homes, send word to the next valley? Maybe. Or maybe we ignored the signs because the world had always worked, and we assumed it always would. You remember the first weeks, the disbelief. The insistence that it was just a late season, just a cold snap, just a bad harvest. No one thought the sky could be broken, but it was. You hear stories now about a few remote communities that made it through better than others. Villages that practiced lowland farming, that stored extra salt and dried meat, that had better trade networks. A few monasteries had deep stores of grain and wine, and records suggest they became regional lifelines. But most of the world? Blindsided. One woman in your village has begun carving a pattern into the wall of her hut, a series of rings, dots, and animal symbols. She says it's a memory map, so if it ever happens again, someone might understand faster. You admire that, not because it's perfect, but because it's an effort. Another man is writing a simple book, What We Did Wrong. You help him gather stories. He records them all, every mistake, every regret, everything he wishes someone had said before it all went grey. You contribute your own entry. Don't trust the sky. Trust your firewood. He chuckles when he writes it down. Some still don't want to talk about the dark years. They call it wallowing. But silence, you've learned, is a kind of starvation too. You overhear a merchant say, "It won't happen again. That was a once-in-a-thousand-years thing." You wish you could believe him. But the monk you've come to respect most says something that stays with you. It wasn't the cold that nearly killed us. It was our confidence that it couldn't happen. Historians in the future will nod at that. They'll study the systems that failed, political, agricultural, spiritual, and they'll point to the few that didn't. The resilient corners, the flexible thinkers, the ones who planned not for the best case, but for the unthinkable. You start helping others build better storage pits, stronger roofs, smarter planting cycles. People call you paranoid. You call it learning. Because if there's one thing this disaster taught you besides how to make soup from nettles, it's this. Survival should come with memory. Otherwise, you're just waiting for the next cold wind to remind you. You're sitting near a fire again, but this time it's not to survive, it's just warmth. Gentle, flickering, quiet. The kind of fire you choose to sit beside. A traveller arrives with a satchel full of strange things. Glass beads, dried citrus, and stories. But it's the story that gets your attention. He speaks of men in far-off lands, thinkers, engineers, watchers of stars who are starting to ask a dangerous question. Could it happen again? You freeze a little inside, because that's your question too. The traveller says, some people believe the world has changed forever, that the sun is safe now, that volcanoes sleep for centuries. But others, scientists, sages, scribes, they believe this isn't the end of danger, just a pause. And they're right, because in your world, there are mountains that still rumble, skies that still flicker, oceans that still boil beneath the surface. The planet is not a polite host. It's wild and powerful, and sometimes forgets to warn us before it turns violent. The traveller tells you about ancient texts from India, from Greece, from the Americas, all full of cycles. Floods, fire, ash, cold, rebirth, patterns that feel eerily familiar. You glance at the fire again. Is it comfort or a reminder? Historians in the future will debate endlessly how to prevent another catastrophe like 536. They'll develop models, simulations, massive warning systems. They'll track volcanic gases from satellites and monitor sunspots and catalogue every tremble beneath the sea. And still, some will say, that was a freak event, we'll see it coming next time. Others will whisper, we thought we'd see it coming last time. They'll call it nuclear winter, solar storms, supervolcanoes, comet impacts. Different names for the same question. What happens if the sky disappears again? You see children playing in the sun that's finally come back. But part of you watches the light carefully. It's still pale, still not what it once was. You wonder if it's healing or if it's just catching its breath. A blacksmith starts building new tools, not weapons, not ornaments, but devices meant to measure wind, water, light. You help him hammer a metal ring, just because it feels important. In some towns, they plant monoliths with carved warnings. Not poetic this time, blunt messages. If the sky turns grey, prepare. If no buds grow by spring, store food. If the sun feels weak, light your fires early. You nod at those stones. Too late for you, but maybe not for someone else. You hear a story from a village in the mountains where elders have decided that every child must plant a tree and memorize the names of 4 volcanoes before they can take a husband or wife. That seems wise. You visit the monastery again. The monk who recorded the year the sun disappeared is older now, but he smiles when he sees you. He started writing a new chapter. The title? How We Returned. It's full of broken grammar and scratched out words, but it's full of truth. Not about volcanoes or sulfur or planetary science, no. It's full of little things. How to dry moss properly, how to store roots without molding them, how to tell when someone's about to give up and how to bring them back. You copy part of it into your own notebook, because now you write too. You never thought you would. But something about surviving makes you want to leave breadcrumbs. Just in case. You don't know if it'll happen again. Maybe in 100 years. Maybe 1,000. Maybe never. But next time, someone will find your pages. Your drawings. Your memory etched into wood and stone and smoke. And they'll be ready. Or at least more ready than you were. You walk through a field that's turning green again. It's not the lush, overwhelming green you remember from childhood stories. It's cautious, sparse. But it's there. Little blades poking through thawed soil. Buds curling on branches. Even the air smells different. Not fresh exactly, but less like fear, more like beginning. You take a slow breath and realize you've come through the darkness. Not untouched. Not unchanged. But here, it's strange, isn't it? After all that ash and hunger and silence, the world just keeps going. It doesn't announce the return of normal with trumpets or divine fire. It just nudges open the door and lets a few flowers peek through. You see your neighbor stacking firewood not for survival but for cooking. Someone else is repairing a cart. Children are playing again, making sun charms out of bark and twine. One boy draws a smiling face on the ground with a stick and tells you, "It's the sun, coming back." You smile, even though you know better. The sun never left. It was always behind the veil. But in a way, so were you. You remember the hunger most clearly, then the cold, then the days that blurred together like wet ink. You remember the faces that faded, the footsteps that didn't return, the whispered prayers, the half-believed prophecies, the jokes that tried to chase off the dark. And now, you're remembering something else. How to live. You notice people talking about next year, about rebuilding, about planting trees not for firewood, but for shade, a kind of long-term hope, cautiously unfolding. A travelling merchant stops by with things you haven't seen in years. Honey, lemons, cloth dyed in real colour. He offers you a taste. You close your eyes and chew slowly. Not because it's rare, but because it's real. In Constantinople, Justinian still rules. His empire limps forward. The laws he wrote will be studied for centuries. But it's not his golden domes you think about. It's the grandmother down the road who taught everyone how to bake moss cakes when the flour ran out. It's the boy who never spoke until one day he sang. It's the man who carved suns into frozen wood, one for each day the sky stayed grey. Historians will write books about this time. They'll name it, classify it, argue about it. They'll call it the worst year to be alive, maybe the worst decade. But they won't know what it felt like. Only you do. You know the weight of waiting, the strange silence of frost-covered mornings, the sound of nothing, the taste of boiled leather, the look people give each other when no one wants to say, "I'm afraid." But now you also know this. The darkness passed. And you remained. Not heroic, not famous, but fiercely, quietly alive. You help a neighbour rethatch their roof. You laugh when a goat headbutts your knee. You run your fingers through green wheat, still short, still tender. You watch the sun without squinting. And you carry the memory of 536 like a stone in your pocket, heavy, familiar, worn smooth by time. You survived a year when the sun forgot to shine. And now? Now, you look toward the light. So now, you settle into the quiet. The night is calm, the air is still, and the world, though shaken, has found its rhythm again. You lie back and imagine the ash lifting from the sky, drifting upward and outward, until the stars blink into view one by one. They're not brighter now, but you see them differently, because you know what it's like to live without them. The silence doesn't scare you anymore. It comforts you. It holds space for all the memories you've gathered. Memories of frost, of fire, of grit and patience and survival. You stretch out your legs, listening to the slow hum of a world that's been through so much. It breathes with you now, not in perfect harmony, but in shared weariness. And in that shared quiet, there's peace. Your eyes grow heavy. The story lingers in your chest like a soft drumbeat, steady and low. You don't need a final twist or an ending wrapped in gold. You just need rest. Gentle, deserved rest. Let the last flicker of the fire fade. Let the light return slowly, patiently. Let morning come when it's ready. You'll be ready too. Because now, You understand the dark. And you've earned the dawn.